Imagine learning to write for the first time and being told you're holding the pencil wrong. Not because you're wrong, but because the world wasn't built for your hand. You reach for a pen, the ink smudges across your palm. You sit at a desk, the armrest is on the wrong side. You pick up scissors, and they resist you. For most left-handers, this is how life begins. The everyday struggles, the micro-adjustments have become so common for the 10% minority that they don't even mention it. Moreover, people rarely ever think about this inconvenience, because to them, the world works fine. But what they do think about is the genius. Da Vinci, Michelangelo, Nikola Tesla, Jimi Hendrix. The overrepresentation of left-handers among architects, artists, musicians, innovators gives birth to this quiet mythology around the left hand, that it's connected to something sharper, something deeper, a different kind of mind. And maybe you've felt pride in that. Maybe you've leaned into it. But here's the thing, what if the story we tell about left-handed people isn't wrong? It's just incomplete. What if the same cognitive flexibility that allows some to thrive also creates a psychological burden most people never see? The question isn't whether left-handed people are smarter. The question is, what does it cost to spend your entire life adapting to a world that wasn't built for you? And when strength comes from necessity, not choice, does it still feel like a gift? Left-handedness is not a disorder, but a persistent, environmental mismatch. The notebook spiral, the door handle, the computer mouse placed on the right, small design choices, repeated daily, quietly force your brain to overcompensate since childhood. Every time you adjust your grip, reposition your body, or pause before acting, your brain is running a background calculation. Over time, left-handers develop what psychologists call environmental vigilance. You learn early that the default setting isn't your setting, so you scan, you adapt, you self-correct. And when this vigilance runs for years, it doesn't just change how you use objects. It changes how you approach uncertainty itself. You often demonstrate a heightened awareness of your surroundings and your actions within them. While most right-handed people move through physical tasks on autopilot, you are running a quiet subroutine. Assess, adjust, proceed. It shapes how you approach the complexities of life. It shapes how you see the world, not as fixed, but as something requiring negotiation, adjustments, adaptation. But this constant low-level adaptation doesn't just build frustration. It creates a psychological texture that most people never develop. It teaches you that comfort is not guaranteed, and that you are responsible for creating it. And with time, it doesn't feel like you are adjusting anymore. You just do things differently. Neuroscience supports the idea that left-handed people show unusual hemispheric language dominance, which means a stronger communication exists between your brain's left and right hemisphere. When the world constantly requires you to adjust and switch strategies, your brain builds more flexible pathways. This is where the myth of left-handed genius quietly breaks down. Left-handers don't think better, they think more flexibly, and this difference matters. Most right-handed people move through the world unconsciously. The environment fits them. There's no friction, so they don't prioritize what left-handers learn early on, which is awareness. And over the years, awareness becomes instinct. You're not solving problems faster, but you're encountering solutions differently. This doesn't create genius, it creates mental flexibility. But the world doesn't see flexibility, it sees outcomes. And when a left-handed person succeeds, we rush to explain it with talent, with brilliance, with something magical in the brain. We see the visible successes, ignore the invisible majority, and assume that a trait caused the outcome. But here's the reality. For every left-handed Gates, there are millions of left-handed people who simply adapted and lived normal lives. So the myth isn't false, it's incomplete. Left-handedness does correlate with cognitive flexibility, and flexibility can support creative or unconventional problem-solving. But it doesn't guarantee it. And more importantly, it doesn't come for free. Adaptation is often praised. We celebrate resilience. We admire people who overcome, But rarely do we talk about the cost. Because here's what happens when you spend a lifetime adjusting. Your brain lifts weight that others never feel. You scan more. You hesitate more. You correct yourself more often, sometimes before anyone even notices. And that creates a cognitive load, the mental effort required to constantly monitor, process, and respond to your environment. Psychologists found slight correlations between left-handedness and anxiety-related traits. Not because left-handed people are fragile, but because prolonged environmental friction asks the brain to stay alert, more often, for longer. Evolutionary psychologist Robin Dunbar offered a more compassionate interpretation that these traits aren't disorders, they're adaptations, responses to growing up in a world that quietly asks you to work harder just to function normally, to develop quite survival strategies, just to meet the same baseline as everyone else. Over time, that heightened attention doesn't just affect thinking, it shapes sensitivity. This may help explain why left-handers have a higher rates of conditions like ADHD or dyslexia. A signal that when a brain is pushed to adapt more, earlier, and longer, it sometimes pays a psychological price. This is the part we almost never talk about. Because when you grow up needing to monitor your surroundings, you don't just become cautious, you become emotionally attuned. Studies suggest left-handed people often experience emotions more intensely, not as volatility, but as depth. You notice shifts in tone. You feel tension sooner. You often over-empathize, not because you are more emotional by nature, but because adaptation teaches you to read the room before the room even speaks. But let me be clear, this doesn't mean you are broken. It means you are often tired in ways that are hard to explain. Imagine running software in the background all the time that no one else has to run. It's not dramatic, it's not traumatic, but it's constantly there. Every tool that doesn't quite fit, every space arranged for someone else, every small adjustment that never gets acknowledged. That effort doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel like pain, it just accumulates. And over time, that invisible load doesn't just create stress. It reshapes your psychological baseline, where ease feels unfamiliar, where difficulty feels normal, where friction becomes the texture of daily life. And maybe that's why the outcome isn't always genius. Sometimes it's hypervigilance, sometimes caution, sometimes emotional depth that feels heavier and more damaging than it looks. This may explain why many left-handed people don't feel special. Because their strengths were never celebrated, they were required. You didn't learn flexibility because it was encouraged, but because the alternative was constant failure. You didn't develop resilience because someone taught you. You developed it because comfort was optional, but progress wasn't. For left-handed people, the lesson is always the same. The world will not adjust to you, so you must adjust to it. That's not empowerment, that's necessity. But necessity builds something real. People in persistent mismatch conditions develop tolerance for friction, not because problems disappear, but because they stop feeling personal. You learn that difficulty is structural, not individual. And over time, that reframes how challenge feels. Not easier, not lighter, just workable. Strength doesn't mean advantage. It means a learned tolerance for friction. And maybe that's the real difference. Not intelligence, not creativity. Just the quiet capacity to keep going when the world doesn't quite fit. And when that becomes your normal, you stop asking what you were given and start noticing what you were shaped into. If this resonated, do share your thoughts if you have either lived or observed the left-hand syndrome.